Hey everyone, this is Mason. Just a quick shout out and a huge thank you to all of our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members. Your support is so appreciated and it helps us keep the lights on, as they say, here at both Herb Rally and the podcast. If you'd like to support our podcast by becoming a member of the Herb Rally Schoolhouse, you can do so for only $10 per month. You can try your first 30 days for free with coupon code podcast at checkout, and you can learn more and register at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And in addition, members get access to exclusive videos, classes, audio and monographs, a private Facebook group, discounts to herbal companies, and more. So one more time, learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And don't forget to use the coupon code podcast at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. One more time, a huge thanks to all of our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members. Now on to the show. Enjoy. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. The content in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to cure, diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. This information has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. We are not doctors, nor do we play one on the internet. Please seek advice from a qualified healthcare professional. Okay, MC Calico, take it away.
Yeah. Smoking herbal blends. We need some Mullen and some Kush, my brethren. While listening to Herb Rally podcast again. Herbalism at its finest with Mason Hutchinson. Yeah.
Hey everyone, this is Mason with the Herbalist Hour. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're joined by Dr. Ingrid Bauer. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. And I was just looking at your Instagram maybe 30 minutes ago, and it looks like you guys just celebrated your 10-year anniversary at Five Flavor Herbs.
Yeah. So I'm actually sitting in our shop in Oakland right now, which is great because I don't live down the street anymore. And our shop has been open here for exactly 10 years and 1 month here in Oakland, right in the heart of things. And the name and the practice actually started way back in about 2005 in Santa Cruz. But our sort of where we are now really has been our thing for about a decade now.
That's amazing. Yeah, 10 years. And like you said, time flies.
Yeah. I painted the walls of this room when I was pregnant with our child who's now 9, and our now 14-year-old freshman in high school was like tagging along, climbing over everything and whatnot. So it's pretty funny to be back here with that perspective.
Very good. And I did not include this in the questions I was going to ask you, but I'm genuinely curious. I've never been to Expo West before. As you may know, I was the event coordinator for Mountain Rose Herbs for over a decade. And just when I started my job, they decided not to go. And then right when I decided to leave Mountain Rose Herbs, they decided to go again. So I actually never got to experience the circus that is Expo West. And I'm just curious what it was like for you and if you noticed any sort of trends in the herbal realm or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. One, the Mountain Rose booth this year was phenomenal.
Hey, I have to say,
gorgeous.
I actually was a part of the process of getting that rolling and designed. I'll give most of the credit to Thomas, but
yeah. And then of course, all of our friends were hanging out there, so we had a good time.
Sure.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a circus. We went this year to attend APA meetings, American Botanical Council events. Some of that's whining and dining. Some of it's actually sitting in meetings and discussing real important things in the herbal industry. And then walked the floor, met with a lot of potential customers. A couple things that I think this year really, really hit is one, regenerative agriculture certification in the herbal industry has really become a new standard, sort of above and beyond organics. And the discussions both on the floor as well as in the industry meetings about what that means for both producers and growers, the sort of pros and cons. I'm an active farmer, but not professionally. I basically have a day job so I can afford to farm. But I'm very familiar with the overburden of paperwork that it places on farmers, especially if it's not something that helps them make more money, for example. With organic certification, at least in the marketplace, that's definitely been something that allows farmers, whether they're growing herbs or they're growing food, to charge a premium that helps cover the cost of more labor for weeding by hand instead of spraying herbicides, or applying compost instead of buying synthetic fertilizers, and all the things and the care that goes in. I don't know yet what the economic ramifications are, but it's possible that may become such a popular certification, it kind of becomes a necessity, especially for herb farmers to enter the marketplace. So that'll be interesting. We hung out a bunch with the folks from Mashallah Farm and talked with them about some of the implications of paperwork burden. So I feel that, because coming from ag, what you really want to be doing is spending the time out there with your plants and your animals and less time in front of your computer. That's why people go into that kind of work. Whereas the people, those of us who have gone into herbal manufacturing, have given up the fact that we're going to, even though we want to be spending all of our time with the plants and the animals, we know that a lot of the time we have to spend in a place like this, and doing paperwork and posting on social media and all this stuff to make our businesses tick. So there's kind of pros and cons of that.
Now, when you say you do your day job to afford your farming, I'm curious what you and Ben are farming. Are these herbs for your herb shop?
So not yet. We don't yet have the technology to do the proper drying, cut, and sifting. But that's something that if we can get it together and apply for the right grants, there are some really good USDA grants out there. So just a little bit of background. Ben, my husband, Ben Zappin, who's a licensed acupuncturist. I'm an herbalist, more of a Western herbalist, and a MD, integrative internal medicine doc. We moved from Oakland to the Sierra Foothills in Nevada City about 4 years ago, and we purchased a former cattle ranch that has 8 acres on it, and most of it's open, which is really unique because most of the area around us is very wooded. But then, it's also Oakland, that was not Oakland City, but Oaklands that were maintained as wildlife grazing and really cultivated for the oaks by Nisenan people. Who are still there, but this landscape is really diverse, and our farm is in the sort of edge between oak lands and pine forest, but was cleared for cattle grazing. And so we have about 5 acres of open land that includes sheep grazing. We have, almost 15 sheep now, which is great because we have a wonderful composting system with their droppings. And then we have about 2 acres of land that's cultivated. And we're very fortunate that our property is actually bisected by the Nevada Irrigation District. So we have municipal water that's at an ag rate that we can pay a flat fee for the year and actually have good access to water that doesn't depend on a well. And this year, with all the rain and the snowpack, we're going to be in good shape. So we are playing around with cultivating different herbs, in part because we're relatively new to this biosphere. I farmed on the East Coast, and then I farmed in Santa Cruz. The foothills is a whole different beast. It freezes in the winter. We have a real winter, and then it's 100 degrees between about June 1st until October 1st. And so figuring out what's going to do the best there is a little bit of a struggle. So before we put all our chips on certain crops, there's some things that do really, really well and others that we tried and kind of pooped. So we're more in the experiment phase, and we're growing small batches of herbs that are for our tinctures, especially our single herb tinctures that we offer. Yeah.
Something you said made me think about something my brother said before. And he said, it's funny how say business districts are named after something that's like completely bulldozed over, and then city life takes over. So Oakland, I never really thought of it, but the way you said that, and I'm like, Hidden Meadows, but it's like some retirement home that's just been
totally. Actually, where we lived in Oakland, right up the street from our shop, our neighbor's backyard had probably 300-year-old heritage oak in their backyard, which almost kind of looked like this massive dinosaur-like creature, huge gray trunks. And it also made it impossible to garden there because we were under all of the oak droppings. So it was beautiful, but between the squirrels that were attracted to the oak tree that would eat anything I planted, and all the oak leaves that were everywhere. But the tree itself was absolutely phenomenal to just be around, and it was totally outdated the whole neighborhood.
Is that the California black oak? Do you know?
That one, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I am a herb person, and my tree, like when I say herb, I literally mean like herb and shrub.
Sure.
I think the next stage of my botanical study really needs to be trees,
Yeah.
because I just never, when I studied herbs, I really never studied trees, and they're one, incredible sources of medicine, but also food, especially here in California with oaks. So living the foothills, we're starting to get to know, but I am embarrassed that that's not something that I have.
Don't be embarrassed. You're a medical doctor, herbalist. You can only fit so
Why
much in
don't I
that
know
brain.
everything?
Yeah, exactly. I'll say
Yeah,
this, and
sometimes I feel like,
yeah.
oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I hope I'm not throwing Howie under the bus, but my original herb mentor, Howie Brownstein, he's kind of the same way. When I took the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, he didn't really teach trees. So yeah, you could only fit so much in the brain.
Totally. I know Seven Song teaches a lot of trees on the East Coast, and whenever I go back east and hang out with him, it's really fun to walk through the forest, because I grew up there, but all my herb studies were here on the West Coast. So it's always interesting to have knowledge of different bioregions and different sort of gaps in your knowledge, but that's okay.
That's a good segue into my first actual question for you. But before I get there, you mentioned APA, and I was just curious if Five Flavor Herbs is involved with APA. I wasn't sure about that, because you also mentioned Oshala Farm, and I saw that Elise Higley was just inducted onto the board, I believe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've been members, and we're active in their the American Herbal Products Association. We're involved in their small business committee, and a number of other committees. I sat in on the sustainability committee this year, because that's a really strong interest of mine, especially coming from the ag world, as well as social justice world. So looking at sustainability, not just in the ecological, but also in the economic and social aspects, whether it's fair trade or thinking about paying fair prices to U.S. farmers and stuff like that.
Right on. So I was curious about your herbal education, and maybe who were some of your early mentors and influences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start off with saying that I am a Chinese medicine baby. And so my start with herbs began pre-conceptually. My parents were back to the land hippies in the 70s, and my mother was really involved in the macrobiotic movement. She lived and studied with Michio Kushi in Boston in the early 70s. But that also meant that she was borderline anorexic and very undernourished, and stopped having her periods with a very extreme, basically vegan diet. And when she decided she wanted to try to have a baby, it wasn't happening. So she started seeing a Chinese herbalist in Boston, Chinatown. And this was before acupuncture was licensed there. So he was practicing out of his living room and couldn't do needling, but did prescribe herbs, and we would still go there when I was a kid, because she continued seeing him. And then if we had something, we would be given herbs. So we would drive to Boston and go to their home, and their living room had a fireplace with a shrine and bowls of oranges and incense. And then the whole room was lined with maple herb drawers, old Chinese pharmacy style. And he made his own tea pills, and they were these little black blobs. And so he would both prescribe decoctions as well as homemade tea pills. I'm sure every formula had Romania and Dangui in it, because they were just sticky, sweet things. And so I grew up around that. So I would say that Dr. Ho was definitely my first herb mentor, even though I didn't study with him. He was the, person who, one, convinced my mom that she was not just going to have to take herbs, but also starting to eat animal protein to be able to bring a child into the world. And then growing up around that as the primary source of medicine. We also used a lot of homeopathy and really simple vitamins and herbs growing up, as well as mostly organic food. And if we ate any meat, it was stuff that we raised, like chickens and lamb and things like that. So there was a very strong attention to, natural health as the baseline. And that's just what I grew up with. I think the first time I had antibiotics was when I was on the verge of death in Guatemala. And the doctor came in and gave me a big shot of penicillin in the butt. And about an hour later, I was like, I'm alive. But that was the first time I'd ever had antibiotics. Because the average American child, they get their first round of antibiotics by 6 months for an ear infection or something that even the American Academy of Pediatrics now says, don't use antibiotics for viral infections. So I feel really fortunate that that was my foundation. So the interesting thing is because my mom was a nurse, I had no interest in anything related to healthcare at all, period.
Okay.
Until I ended up doing a wilderness first aid class in college because I was leading backpacking trips and you needed to do it. And so I did some first aid trainings. That was like, okay, yeah, fine. But what really led me into anything related to any kind of health care and practitioner land was in January of 2021. I landed in Washington, D.C. for protests against the inauguration of President Bush II. And I was going to go to a legal training. I was going to train to be a legal observer. I was an anthropology major. I was, very heady and studied international economy and all this stuff. So I thought I would do that. I showed up in the wrong place and it was a street medic training.
Okay.
And then the legal training was going to be a subway right away and on the other side of the city. And so I just decided to stay because I was like, well, I did this wilderness first aid class and I fell in love. And half of the street medics were herbalists.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were like old school herbalists. Some of them were Michael Moore students, et cetera. And so there is a street medic training and the herbal training that basically ended up happening simultaneously from there.
Was Seven Song a part of that?
That was the beginning. Yeah. He and I ran on the streets a bunch together. I think actually he was at that protest and, was one of the people that this was before most people didn't have cell phones. I think some of us had flip phones, but we were really, we didn't have complicated communication systems, et cetera. And so I remember Seven Song talking about listening and paying attention to where the helicopter was and helping that make your decision about where you were going to go or where you were not going to go during the protest. So that was kind of the beginning of the rest of my life.
Just a quick break from the show to let you know about the Herb Rally events page. Did you know that we add new herbalism events from all over the United States and the world for that matter on an almost daily basis? You can peruse herbalism events at herbrally.com/events and hopefully find something in your neck of the woods. You can also search by state to make it even easier to find a plant walk, conference, or class near you. And we also list virtual herbalism events as well. Check those out at herbrally.com/virtual. And again, for the in-person events, go to herbrally.com/events. All right, back to the show.
Different times. Yeah. Pre-cell phone. I was just watching, this is going to sound really weird, but I was just watching the 1993 NBA finals, which is the Houston Rockets. Anyways, I watched, excuse me, my microphone. I watched it because it was my it was like my gateway into getting into like basketball, which I love the sport of basketball. And I bring it up because we looked into the we looked into the audience and everybody there was so present and we were like, what's going on? The crowd is so excited. Oh, none of them have cell phones. Everyone just seems so stoked to be there. I'm like, it just feels different. And it just made me think, I'm like, I need to put my phone away more, but yeah. So going back to that time, do you have any remembrance of a specific plant that you kind of fell in love with?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of when I started studying herbs, I think one of the first things, because I grew up farming, I grew up working with plants, but because my dad ran a commercial farm, it was organic, but it was still, this is a weed and this is a vegetable. And so you pull the weeds and then you leave the vegetables, and the weeds are kind of your enemies, especially if you're an organic farmer. The weeds really are your enemies. You don't have, that's one of the biggest challenges. Fertility is really easy, but dealing with weed is challenging. But I remember when I was involved with the student farm as an undergraduate, I actually went to school in Ithaca. I went to Cornell. I didn't know Seven Song then, but we later got to know each other. And somebody pointed out that nettles were both edible and medicinal. And I'm like, oh, nettles, they sting. They're so annoying. I'm constantly having to deal with them. And this is the Urtica urens. That's more the agricultural weed. And it was this huge aha moment. And I feel like that was actually before I did any of my other state or started formal herbal training, but that was this light bulb of like, oh, all these plants that I've treated as things that I need to pull and throw out. And then I learned about eating pigweed, which is, an amaranth relative, chickweed, and all these things that I could pick out from in between and then include in my salads or make teas out of. So that was really some of the beginning where I started being interested myself, which was very different than like, here, take this crushed up zinc tablet because your mom says you have to when you have a cold, which was my orientation to like natural medicine as a kid. I think once I actually started studying herbs more intentionally, I really focused on things that I could either grow or harvest myself. And I basically refused to use anything that I couldn't grow or harvest myself. I was like anti being an herb, a mail order herbalist. I will not buy anything. And so my repertoire was fairly limited, but I got to know those herbs super, super well. And that was things like yellow dock root and lemon balm and nettles and all these really simple things I had access to where I was.
Yeah, the weedy ones are my favorites too, and that was kind of my gateway as well, was learning that you could eat dandelion leaves. It was just I've always kind of been infatuated with the plant, but once I found out it was like a highly nutritive food as well, it was just I always call that my gateway herb. In fact, it's the Herb Rally logo too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
now I know why. That's awesome.
Exactly. So I know you and I wanted to discuss a little bit about herbal remedies for stress and mood. So yeah, let's get that going. What do you have any suggestions for that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a good segue too, because I mentioned lemon balm.
Yeah.
And lemon balm and skullcap were probably my first two main nervines that I worked with. So when I think about nervines, I think about categories, right? Because I like to think about practicing flexible herbalism. So it's a little different than when I started, right? When I was like, you have to only use what you can access. Now I more think, okay, let's think about these categories and then herbs that kind of fit in those categories. And then you have a menu of options that you can pick from depending on what you have access to at any given time. And then you can draw from things in those categories especially to formulate, because I usually use herbs in formula, except if I'm, say, treating something very specific, working with a kid, working with somebody who has, say, neurotherapeutic drugs, and I want to avoid certain things, or I'm studying a plant and just want to use that to really see how it affects me, or I'm making recommendations to an herb student who's just a beginner, because I think it's a great place to start with feeling each plant and playing around with it separately. So when I think about herbs for stress and mood, I mostly think about herbs that are in both nervine and adaptogenic categories. And in terms of the nervine categories, I'm really thinking about, okay, is it more sedating, or is it more nourishing, or is it just frankly soporific, like hops or valerian, versus the more like calming, soothing nervines would be things like lemon balm, skullcap, catnip, things like that. And then in terms of the more nourishing, soothing ones, lemon balm can kind of go in that because it's very gentle, but I'm more thinking things like gotu kola, bacopa, milky oats, where you also have this like nourishment to the nerves themselves. And depending on kind of how you categorize things, maybe St. John's wort would go in there too. Somewhat, supplementing. And we know pharmacologically it has very specific actions there. And then I also think that when you're dealing with a lot of low mood, for example, comes from being fried, wired and tired. And so using some adaptogenic herbs, not to override, because I think there's a lot of promotion, especially being here in the Bay Area where there's biohackers and high performance executives who
Yeah.
they're just trying to optimize every second using nootropics and using all these substances to just try to make more money and invent more stuff and be the smartest and the most successful. You can do that, but how does that actually address the imbalance? That's just using herbs as little drugs to try to overcompensate for maybe an unsustainable lifestyle. But if but it is true. Like if your mood is down or you're really stressed out, the adaptogenic herbs, especially those that are a little less stimulating, I really love ashwagandha, which has gotten crazy popular, but it doesn't matter. I still love it, in part because I can grow it and have a connection with it from that. I also, for the right time and place, I find rhodiola very, very supportive, but a little more stimulating and also pretty drying. So I have to use it very selectively. And I would say somewhere in the middle between all those, holy basil, which is another one that I love to grow. And actually, I spend more time just out in the garden sniffing it and hanging out with it and having the bees buzz around. And maybe it's because I always just sort of forget to get around to garbling the stuff that I grow myself. I end up growing a lot less, like consuming a lot less tea than just enjoying having it all over my property in the summertime.
You used a term, I thought I heard you say soporific, and I don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Term.
Yeah, soporific would be things that really make you feel like if you drink a really hoppy beer and you're like, oh boy, I'm so done. So soporific meaning something that's like highly sedating and gonna just put you to sleep. So, hops, valerian. Some people put passion flower in there. I think depends on the person. Some people respond really strongly to it. Others don't. A category I didn't also say under Nervines is in part because I'm just talking off the top of my head and not off
Sure.
notes, is thinking about herbs that help with calm anxiety. And of course, in the product world with Deshay, we have to be really careful about what we can and can't say. But when I'm just talking about herbs and categories, I think anxiolytics is an herbal action type that herbalists talk about. And some of my favorite anxiolytics, again, skullcap really hits there big time. Kava Kava is a huge favorite that I rely on a lot. And California poppy is both anodyne and so phenomenal as a single for coping with anxious overwhelm kind of feeling.
Do you have any opinions or teachings on blue vervain? Because that's always of interest to me. Like the way people described skullcap and how it affects them, I kind of feel like that's kind of blue vervain for me. And I don't know if there's anything going on there. But yeah, if you have anything to say about blue vervain, I'm very curious.
Totally. It's really interesting. Blue vervain is one of Ben's favorite herbs.
Really?
And it's one of the ones, yeah. And it's one of those that it's so bitter that I think I avoid consuming too much of it. It's kind of like mugwort. I mean, not mugwort. It's more like as bitter as motherwort and say horehound almost. It's really on that end where I kind of like the sweet bitterness of skullcap better. But I think blue vervain or skullcap are they're really good buddies too. I think that biochemically, and I need to go verify this, but I'm pretty sure it has some GABAergic activity similar to kava, where it's not kava, like skullcap. It's not a lock and a key. It's not like a GABA agonist where it actually fits into the GABA receptor per se, but it modulates and thus can kind of tamp down the stress response. So yeah, blue vervain is great. There's an amazing blue vervain that I think it's Verbena hastata that grows in the coastal ranges in the central coast of California in a place that a huge crew of us used to go camping every single spring. Grows all along the roadsides, and like right now, this time of year, it's just ecstatic. And we made some really fun formulas where we harvested blue vervain, California poppy, and some wild California valerian from the same areas and made really amazing, just like super chill formulas. Maybe some oats in there. Maybe some oats in there too to kind of like sweeten it up a little bit and nourish it out.
Can't go wrong with oats. That's probably my most consumed herb. People Herb Rally podcasts have heard me talk about oats and oat straw ad nauseum at this point. But yeah, I'm curious. Maybe I don't do so well with skullcap? Because is there a difference between fresh skullcap and dried skullcap that you're aware of? Is that a thing?
Biochemically, no, but I think
Okay.
flavor wise, really
Oh, okay.
differently. I think people respond to skullcap very uniquely. I remember being so one of these like, these like memorable moments when you're a early herbalist and you give something to somebody that really works and you
Mm,
never forget that moment.
yeah.
I was in New Orleans in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina, and we joined with a community organization that started a first aid clinic um, in the city there. And a woman who had been doing dog rescue, because all these dogs were abandoned and there were dogs locked up, and it was really traumatic, not just
Yeah.
for the humans but for all the animals left in the city. And she hadn't slept for 3 days and she'd been bitten, and she came in to get her bite kind of cleaned up, and she was palpitating, just super high anxiety. And I remember putting 15 drops of skullcap tincture into a 12-ounce plastic water bottle, because we were all drinking bottled water. And, I'm the kind of person, I dose really heavy with herbs. I just, couple dropperfuls many times. Just, you need to hit me with like a ton of bricks for something to knock me out.
Yeah.
She came back 2 days later and she said, whatever you gave me, that was super strong. She said, I just slept for 36 hours. And I think it wasn't because it's such a strong soporific plant. I think
Right.
it's because she was so wired and so tired that just this teeny hint to her body of like, hey, chill out, you need to rest. And then she just needed all that sleep. But it really hit me. And ever since then, when I'm working with skullcap, I usually have people start with it as a single.
Mm-hmm.
And then I recommend try 5 drops, try 10 drops, and just wait and sit with it, because that might be enough for you. And if you're like me and you need to take 2 squirts, that's fine too. But it's definitely unique. Whereas I think other herbs are a little less dose sensitive across different individuals.
It's very interesting because, yeah, with a blue vervain, I do feel like I just need almost like this tiny amount to kind of feel the effects. But say I've been taking St. John's wort regularly now for the past month or so, and am I noticing it? I don't actually know. And I was told, give it 3 months, which I'm fine with. I've been pretty good about taking it a few times a day. But yeah, I don't feel any sort of energetic difference. But just the mere mention, you said ashwagandha earlier, and I was like, I don't know. There was like this sigh of relief internally when you said that word, and yeah, I have like these associations with the plant. So maybe there's partially like that automatic response or placebo or something like that going on there. But
definitely. Yeah, set and setting is important as we take these, and that's why I for example don't really practice flower essences or some of the things that I find that maybe are a little more esoteric, but there is really something to giving something, any kind of medicinal anything, to somebody and saying like, this is what it's going to do for you, and setting that is part of the rapport and the clinical practice. And I, as a physician who prescribes, for better or for worse, a lot of pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
I spend a lot of time talking to my patients about what they might expect, potential side effects, the benefits they're expecting to see. And most of my patients say, wow, no doctor has ever bothered to tell me the pros and cons of a drug that they're going to prescribe me. They just write it and say, take this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, I can't, one, I have to, that's my obligation. And 2, I'm kind of used to that from herbal medicine.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like most of the herbs that I give people, I've used in my body and I have a personal relationship and familiar with how they feel. But the vast majority of drugs that I prescribe, except for like ibuprofen, I've never taken. So I don't know how they feel in my body. So it's so different to practice these such different modalities, but a lot of the same skill sets still apply in terms of building rapport, building trust, setting up somebody to kind of expect what they might feel, and then also say, and if it doesn't work, or you don't feel anything, or you have this bad thing that happens, like, hey, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
We can change things up.
Speaking of me looking at your Instagram 30 minutes before our call, it does look like you just came out with the new glycerite formula, and I was curious if you wanted to chat about that at all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Yeah, so we not all of our products are, sorry, I'm just like showing it off
No, it's great.
because it has a
Please.
little logo on it.
Yeah.
Not all of our products are certified organic, in part because we have some stuff that we pick from the yard on our farm, and so our California poppy is not certified organic. And there's some herbs that are wild crafted because they're really not available in commerce, or there's a few Chinese medicinals that we feel that are so important, even though they're not certified, we use them, and we're getting them from suppliers who, do testing, and we have C of A's, and we do our own testing for heavy metals, pesticide residues, stuff like that. But our facility is certified by CCOF to produce organic material, and of course, we have a lot of customers that we make products for that they want certified. So we've finally started getting more and more of our products certified as more Chinese herbs are available. So slowly, we're rolling that out. And we had a customer ask us to make a glycerin or alcohol-free version of our sustainable energy, which is just a fairly standard, but really awesome adaptogen blend. And so we finally pressed it out, and hopefully we can get better yield in the future. Getting a good yield on anybody out there in Radioland has good manufacturing techniques for dried roots in glycerite. We have much better luck with aerial portions. Roots and mushrooms and glycerin is a disaster. Your yields are really low, but it's awesome because so many people just don't want an alcohol-based product. And a lot of people don't like taking things that don't taste good.
Glycerites are pretty tasty.
The number of times I've been to a conference where we're sampling our stuff and seeing people's faces, I'm like, you're in an integrative medicine conference. You're not used to taking nasty, bitter stuff. And seriously, like even a lot of the naturopathic doctors who practice now, lots of people practicing Chinese medicine, they've either studied or now practice with so many products that are encapsulated that the sort of taste of herbs, which is often bitter, like blue vervain, for example, a lot of people are just turned off. So having things that are tasty, it's kind of a positive feedback loop. I want to take this because it doesn't just make me feel good, but it tastes good to take. So it's fun. It's fun when we're able to come out with some new stuff and make it accessible to more people.
I don't remember the exact herb that he was talking about, but I just interviewed my friend Yakov Levine. He's a nutritionist, and he was talking about if you're going to take a herbal pill, at the very least, maybe open one up and then like shove or like sprinkle the powder all over the rest of the pill. So it kind of, at least you get the bitter receptors or whatever going on there.
Totally. I think that's really important. Whenever I take like Gaia liquid gels, I just pop them in my mouth. I don't swallow them.
Yeah.
Because I actually want to taste. I want to taste.
Oh, like you pop them in your mouth.
Like I popped the Gaia gel caps in my mouth. Same with fish oil and stuff like that. It's weird. But I actually like the flavor. And in terms of for bitter herbs, for example, Triphala is one of my absolute, have to take it every day, keeps me regular and in many ways, not just the gut touch. But the difference between like how I feel if I take capsules, like if I'm traveling right now, so I have capsules with me, it's just very different than pouring it into water and whisking it around and just choking back this one of the bitterest things you could ever do. But you really, really are activating every pathway through the gut by tasting those bitter herbs on your tongue first. And I think that's a huge part of the medicine.
Triphala, I would describe it as bitter, but there's so many flavors going on in that blend, which is 3 fruits. I want to say it's Bibitaki, Haritaki, and Amlaki. It's like a Ayurvedic remedy, and I'm actually about to interview KP Khalsa, who's also one of my original herbal teachers. I'm super excited. Maybe I'll bring up the Triphala. That's really neat that you consume that every single day.
Yeah, that's one of the few things I can remember to take. But again, we remember to take the things that make us feel good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like I said earlier, oat straw, like I'm consuming quarts of oat straw infusion every day. And nowadays I'm doing the St. John's wort, but I have little phone reminders. So if you want a little tip, dear listener, for how to remember to take your herbal remedies, just set 3 reminders per day on your phone. That's what I do.
Just a quick break from the show to let you know about our sliding scale, ever-expanding course called The Art of Frugal Nutrition. The goal of this course is to teach you how to eat nourishing foods on a budget. As I mentioned, it's a sliding scale, and it even slides all the way down to free. And what's more frugal than free? We add new modules with highly esteemed herbalists and nutritionists every few months, so it continues to grow, as with most projects here at Herb Rally. If you'd like to learn more and register, head to herbrally.com/frugal nutrition. One more time, that's herbrally.com/frugal nutrition. All right, now back to the show.
Cool. Well, why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk about herbal career paths? I know you got some thoughts
Sure.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm biased, and I'm curious if you have other questions about it. I'm a little bit biased in part because I chose to, again, take this really conventional path. I studied herbs. I did first aid, wilderness first responder, did an EMT training class, finished EMT training with my certification, and realized I was already making more at farmers market than I would working as an EMT. So I never ended up using that. And but it was actually through these protest experiences where I realized that I was constantly in this situation where we needed a doctor, either because we had somebody with really complex, serious medical issues going on. For example, that time in New Orleans, we had all these people that had really severe underlying diabetes or hypertension, and they were coming in with blood pressures that we couldn't even measure because they were so high, or they needed insulin. And we were really fortunate. We actually traveled there with a psychiatrist who didn't, hadn't really practiced internal medicine since residency, but he had a license. And so he could write the prescriptions, and the people could drive over into Texas and get their meds. And it was one of these kind of, okay, this, maybe I need to do this thing so that I can help more people than just either beyond what just herbs can do. Because these were folks that, hawthorn and passion flower and motherwort probably weren't going to be enough to bring their hypertension down to a safe realm where they weren't going to have a stroke or a heart attack. So that's when I started the whole medical school path. But it was a tough choice. I actually explored doing a master's entry nurse practitioner program, which I think for people who have some background and experience, but maybe are not young enough to want to go through the time and expense of med school, or need a little more flexibility in their work-life balance. I think doing nursing or nurse practitioner or physician's assistant are really, really good ways to become a healthcare professional where you can get a job, where you can serve people that can only afford the healthcare that's covered by their insurance. And I think in the world of even conventional medicine, there are so many ways now that you can practice in an integrative manner that you don't have to necessarily fall in the box. I had chips on my shoulder, multiple chips on my shoulder about those other career paths. And so I went the doctor route, for better or for worse. There's been many times where I wish I'd just done a nursing program because I went through med school with kids and running a business. And it's been a huge amount of debt, and it took up a decade of my life to do the training. Yeah. But I wouldn't go back at this point.
Right.
But I have a lot of people ask me, what should they do? I've studied herbs, so now I really want to figure out how I can either serve more people, or how can I figure out how to actually make a decent living, because I'm not that interested in being an entrepreneur. And those are folks, because you kind of you have to hang your shingle and figure out how to make it work, whether you're a clinician or making products or both. So I usually steer people towards a degree that has some conventional value where you could possibly go out and get a job. If people who love being self-employed, people who are super, super self-motivated and definitely don't want a boss, don't want to deal with BS, don't want to deal with insurance billing, don't want to deal with any of that stuff, then exploring things like naturopathy or acupuncture, I think are really, really good options. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them at all. But it's much harder to go out and get a job with those. And if you're like me, you grew up poor and you just knew that you needed that for your own rock of certainty, I knew that doing something a little more conventional is going to help provide me with that for myself as well. that hence the like, I have a day job so I can farm. My dad was a farmer and didn't make much money, so I knew that I didn't want to do that professionally.
Right.
Yeah.
My friend just became a nurse, and I watched him go through years of trying to get into nursing school. But you know what? After a few years, he finally made it in, and now he's doing it. And he finds he's not an herbalist, but he finds it to be an incredibly rewarding career path. And I never really thought about it the way that you're putting it. Why not get a very conventional job to kind of subsidize your side gig as an herbalist or whatnot? And some of the best herbalists I know are like nurse/herbalists. And in fact, you might have even worked with one in New Orleans. Did you work with a Wendy in New Orleans?
Possibly.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah, she was
It was,
there.
it was a minute ago.
Sure. Yeah, there was a whole
Time flies. It was a minute ago.
herbal, crew down there for the whole Hurricane Katrina situation. Yeah. And but yeah, I just love the whole nurse herbalist. I think it's a really well balanced approach.
The other thing is that you can't go wrong with getting the science training that you get in nursing and or any of these other training programs. I mean, there are a lot of herb schools teach anatomy and physiology, and they do a good job, but you might as well, especially if you can do those classes at a community college. I mean, I'm not going to, if you want to spend your money on an herb school that offers those, that's awesome. But you also might be able to get that part of your education at, I went to community college at Cabrillo College in Aptos, SoCal near Santa Cruz. Each course cost me about $100 plus books and stuff. It was absolutely phenomenal. And the education was better than my fancy East Coast big university because they were small classes. They were taught by the professors. Everybody was there because they were there because they wanted to learn the material instead of because it was some major requirement. And so I got to do anatomy and physiology, and I did all that there even before med school as part of the nursing program. And having that, I teach a lot of red flags classes for herbalists. I teach a lot of conventional health information for herbalists because I think if you're going to put yourself out there as somebody who's helping people clinically, you need to have a really big scope of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's a really big responsibility. You don't necessarily need to go to med school.
Right.
It takes a particular, particular person who loves to work hard and doesn't mind agony and doesn't need a lot of sleep to go through that. But I think that having a really solid science background and understanding of human anatomy and physiology is really important to being a responsible herbalist.
Yeah, and I'll second your community college recommendation. I actually took anatomy and physiology at LCC here in Eugene, and the teacher was amazing. I picked up I still remember some of the stuff to this day, and that was probably 15 years ago. So, yeah, community college, good recommendation.
Yeah, and then I don't think that the other plug that I would say is that I think right now there is a huge lack of mental health care providers, and there's a lot of opportunities it's a very long path and very hard work to become a MSW or LCSW, so a licensed therapist. But the number of people that need mental health care right now is so tremendous after the past few years, especially with kids and teens. Anybody who's thinking about, especially if you're interested in nervines and how herbs affect the mind and the mood, and you care about helping people, that's another career pathway. There are some very strict areas around licensure about what you can and can't do depending on your state, but it is a really amazing way to help people with or without herbs.
Good choice. Okay. Do you have any advice for running a clinical practice?
I don't run my own clinical practice. I work in a community health center. I have a doctor job. And so I already run one business. I have no interest in running another one.
That's fair.
If you do run a clinical practice, I would seek professional mentorship in how to get all your forms set up. I would try to use EMR where you have electronic records, get all your, consent forms, everything, get it streamlined, get it so that it's all integrated into an electronic system, and make sure that it's all vetted and make sure that you have insurance.
Well, you still had some recommendations, so there you go.
Yeah.
I'm feeling compelled to ask you this question. I feel like you might be a good person to ask. What do you think the herbal industry needs the most right now to evolve positively besides more herbalists?
Oh, I mean, it's a really big question. I think that
Yeah.
one, I think there's many herbal communities, and there's not just one herbalism industry or one way of practicing herbalism. So I would say I think the whole world needs this. Is just a lot more like humility and decentralizing of how important we all think we are, and recognizing the plethora of diversity of different types of healing modalities, of industries, of specialties, expertise that are out there, and being a little less ego and cultural centric. And I root
Well,
myself in being very involved in the Western, mostly white Western herbal community in North America, mostly English speaking, mostly Anglo background type people. But just recognizing that there is a huge, herbal medicine is the most widely practiced form of healthcare for all the humans on the planet. And there are how many billions of
yeah.
us? So to go to, Expo West or go to APA meetings and be like, this is the center of the herb industry and universe. It's like just a small part. So let's be humble. And I think just really thinking about the impact that all of these humans are having on the planet, and thinking about how can we not just have it like my health, my body, I want to consume this, but really thinking like holistically about how do humans exist with all the other humans and all the other beings on the planet, and then the existing resources that are here to support that. I think thinking less extractively and less we're so important, and practicing with more humility is really what we need in general.
I love that answer. Yeah, I think we could all be a little bit more humble, and that's really Herb Rally's mission, is to just highlight the many different traditions and herbalism. And the second I start to think that I know something or I've got it figured out, that's when I either humble myself or the universe humbles me. And yeah, I love that answer. I don't know if I've spent enough time highlighting 5 flavor herbs, and we still have a couple more questions, but can you speak more about 5 flavor herbs, where to find you, and all of what you all do there and everything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm sitting in our herb shop in Oakland. We are both a community herb shop, and we're an herbal pharmacy, and we serve people actually all over the country. We don't ship internationally, so we have a few folks in Canada who have a skybox at the border, and then they can get their stuff. But otherwise, it's all U.S. And people can order formulas online. The cool thing is that we have both Chinese and Western herbs in that formulary, and we have the tinctures, raw bulk herbs for tea, and granules that are really high quality Chinese herbal extracts. And so it allows a lot of flexibility for practitioners to use different herb traditions and blend them together, and also deliver herbs in different modalities. So that's a big chunk. That's what we do down here in Oakland. We make all of our tinctures, obviously, and we have both our custom formulas or our specialized proprietary line of formulas that people can buy here in Oakland, or they can buy online. And then we do a lot of manufacturing for other companies too. So we do contract manufacturing, and again, because we have the organic certification, we make a lot of certified organic products. We mostly just work with liquids, so we make tinctures, and we make some glycerins and oils, topicals, liniments, mouthwashes, things like that. But we don't have capsulation technology. We don't do other types of products. We're working right now on amping up our topicals capacity with salves and liniments and ointments and things like that, and hopefully a cream machine. Which if Ben's listening, he'll appreciate. He's been wanting a cream machine for a really long time. So that's sort of a new service line that we're operating. We kind of stopped making salves when we stopped making stuff in our kitchen because it was too much of a mess to make it at an industrial level without the right equipment. So we're getting back up on that. And it's a good time because FDA regulations around topicals is coming back around. And since we really do everything at FDA compliance with CGMP, we're going to launch our topical production and contract manufacturing for that with all that compliance in mind. And I think a lot of companies, just like 10, 15 years ago, companies like us were going out of their kitchens and basements into industrial sort of certified facilities. A lot of people who have smaller companies making topicals are going to be doing that. So hopefully we can serve more customers with those products. TBD.
Did you say Ben's listening? Is he there?
I don't know. He's driving, but
Oh, okay.
I'm sure he'll chime in later.
I was gonna say, tell him I said hi. I also wanted to point out you also do education, both in person and I believe online. So and where can people go to learn more about some of your online education or in-person education?
Yeah, so we have continuing education for acupuncturists. We offer a lot of courses. Ben and our dear friend Sally Chang are doing a Redwood retreat at Quaker Center in Ben Lomond in May, which is really exciting. All of our events are both on Eventbrite. You can find us on Eventbrite under 5 Flavors Herbs, and on our website, there's a classes tab. And then there's links to all the classes there. And then we usually post them on social media and on Facebook, so you can get more information there. And we're having classes at our shop in Oakland for people who are in the Bay Area. We've been offering free community classes a few times a month in the evenings, which is really fun to have people back in the shop after being kind of hunkered down for a few years.
Definitely. And you'll have various guest teachers from all over the nation there sometimes as well, I've noticed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because you post our events. Seven Song's gonna come
that's
visit
true.
us in May. He's teaching with he's like the star of the show. He's teaching at California school, and then gonna come visit us. And we said, why don't you teach a bunch? She's like, I really just want to hang out. I said, please, will you teach? So he's gonna do an herbal first aid workshop on our ranch, which is gonna be super fun because in May everything will just be busting out and be gorgeous and green still. So we're gonna do herbal first aid at the farm, and then do a class on his perspectives on Lyme related conditions, and that one will be offered via Zoom, so people can Zoom in from around the world. You want to join us?
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I don't think I had this on the question list either, but do you have any quick advice for working with your significant other?
I don't know if I'm one to ask. It's really hard. It's really hard. I'm going to turn that one back around. How about you?
It's really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that if things get really hard, I think that even a few sessions with either a therapist or somebody who can help mediate, even if that's like a business consultant, just a neutral third party who can give you feedback. And also if there is something that's like, especially with business decisions, if you're having not agreeing, especially if you're just two of you running something together, sometimes you need a tiebreaker, or at least you need somebody to give you feedback or to make the space safe so that you feel like you're like, hon, we've been talking about this, but I need to tell you that I actually think it's a really bad idea and I don't want to do it. That can be really hard to say to somebody you love because you want everything to be groovy all the time. But going on walks together where you actually don't talk about business, or going on dates where you don't talk about business, talk about a film, don't talk about your kids' grades, talk about something that's totally different, that are things that you guys connected with in the first place before you got all entangled in all this messy stuff, is a really good way to step away and just keep it positive and keep it light. So we figured it out. That's really great advice. I love that. And it's funny because we do a date night on Thursday nights, and I found myself talking about work stuff, and I'll try to not do that next time. So thank you. If you talk about work, put it on the business card. If you talk about work, make it a business expense. But if you don't talk about work, you gotta put it through your personal checking account. That's pretty funny. I love that. You asked me for advice too. I would just say I think it's kind of going back to humility also, and giving credit where it's due. I try to praise Amanda publicly as often as possible, just to make sure people know all the amazing things that she does. And she's in the other room, so I know she's probably listening to this, so I'm trying to it's been fun. It's fun to have a shared vision and work towards it together. So
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. Why don't we get to the random question part of the show? And I'm going to choose a question from here and we'll see what we got. So, oh, have you ever collected anything? If so, what?
You're asking an herbalist? Is that I'm trying to think of the most. Okay. I think the most I'm just trying to think about, I'm thinking about some wild crafting moments. I'm thinking about wild crafting gumweed, grindelia, on the on the coastal bluffs when it's really, really windy, and trying to keep the sand from getting stuck in the white gum, and then ending up just with this like whole bag. You work for hours and hours and you finally get like a couple pounds, like individually picked little tiny flower heads, and you get home and the whole thing is just like completely filled with sand, every single so that was something I've collected for sure. And then collecting something you didn't intend. I have never been somebody to collect things, like have like a collection of stuff, unless you include like having a garage full of like totes full of dried herbs.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like you got a bunch of jars in the background and tincture bottles, so you collect those.
Yeah.
For me, I'll go back to my earlier answer where I announced to the world that I like basketball and professional basketball. And yeah, I would say in grade school I collected basketball cards. So that's my non-herb related answer. But of course, I have tons of herbs and everything like that as well. Right on. Well, let's get to the final question here. What's your favorite part of being an herbalist, and why? What's your big why that keeps you learning and growing?
I think my favorite part of being an herbalist is just the feeling like I have access to, and this is almost kind of cheesy, and I feel like it's a little bit cheesy, but I do really feel that as an herbalist, I feel that I have the skills to help my kids, my family, my friends with like really, really safe, cheap, and often like right at my fingertips remedies. It doesn't just have to be herbs. It can be foods. It can be stuff from the grocery store. But especially working in a conventional healthcare setting, I work all the time with people that, whether they're, well, I don't really work with kids, but whether they're really young or really old, they don't have any self-care tools. And I feel like as an herbalist, that is just so empowering. I think that's why so many people are interested in it. It's like, oh, this is part of just every culture's history, or otherwise we wouldn't be here if we hadn't figured out how to heal ourselves, and animals figure out, the bear dig up the OSHA root or whatever. Like animals know how to do this too, but humans have devolved in so many places, especially industrialized societies have devolved from that skill set. As being reconnected into the healing ourselves, healing our family and friends, for the most part with most simple stuff, is one of the most empowering parts. And really the thing that I enjoy the most about being an herbalist, because I just get to do it all the time. And that's also my big why. Like that's the thing that keeps me learning, growing, trying things for myself, and reading and teaching. I would also say that just teaching about herbs is one of the things that is really one of the things that keeps me learning and growing. Because if I'm going to go teach a class, I'm going to spend hours. I probably spent 40 hours producing 2 hours of material for the AHG COVID webinar that I did this January. And I've been reading and studying about COVID now for 3 years, but the amount of information I went in and read about mitochondrial dysfunction and, oxidative stress on the body and all these different pathways to support, I wouldn't have done that unless I was motivated to do it, to teach. And now I get to use that when I have patients who come in and they're having post-COVID symptoms or post-vaccine symptoms. I can speak to that because I did a whole bunch of reading. I can't necessarily say I have clinical competence and expertise, but this is at least what we're thinking. And there's no conventional treatment for it. there's some
Yeah.
palliative supportive things, but there's nothing that's going to cure you. So here's some tools. And then here's some tools that you can use to help yourself. So I love that.
I don't think that was a cheesy answer at all. Maybe a cheesy question, but well said. Very beautiful. Thank you so much again, Dr. Ingrid Bauer, for joining us on the Herbalist Hour. Any parting words?
No, I'm just honored to get to be a part of this. I love talking, so it's a perfect thing for me to be involved with.
You're great at it.
Sorry if I cut you off. I'm working on being a better listener. That's definitely a challenge for me.
It's the way of Zoom. It's just hard with Zoom with the delays. So sorry, continue.
No, it's all good. So yeah, I'm excited. I've listened to a few of the podcasts that came before, and when I drive or garden, I often listen to podcasts. So I'm glad to have a whole new cache of awesome people that I either know or haven't met before. And I think I'll probably meet even more of the folks at the International Herb Symposium in June. I've never been, even though I'm from Massachusetts. So I'm super excited. And I don't know if you'll be there, but if not, I'll be seeing a bunch of your other guests there.
Yeah, I'm not going this year. At least I'm 99% sure, but I keep getting invited, and I doubt it's going to happen. I've been twice. Amazing event. It's a fundraiser for United Plant Savers. So learn more at internationalherbsymposium.com. Definitely go. It's a great cause, an amazing event. But also be sure to visit Five Flavor. Is it Five Flavors?
Yes.
It's Five Flavors. Okay, Five Flavors.
Five Flavors. Yes.
Herbs.com.
The other plug is I'll be teaching a class at the American Herbalist Guild this fall in Granby, Colorado in October on place-based formulas. So that whole idea of, there was the vervain and the California poppy growing in the same field, and we made this Nervine formula. Hopefully I'll get out there early enough to make some formulas from the space, or at least envision some, but I'm excited to go.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link to that as well. Yeah, very good. Well, thanks again, Ingrid, and I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, sounds
Later.
good. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.